A large model Showman'S engine. This is part 9, a collection of small but important jobs. I'll start with some painting. Here I'm touching in the rim around one of the rear wheels. I intend to paint most of the wheels, all 4 of them, and the back ones are really big. The painting of the wheels is quite a big job, it's going to take a long while. I'm going to paint these wheels in stages because they are so big, I really don't think I could do this in one go. I'm being very careful not to paint over any of the lining on the spokes. This is a paint touching in marathon, even around this edge took quite a while. The front wheels are more difficult because on the rear wheels there's a gap between the wheel itself and the tyre, owing to the strakes which are all the way around the wheel, because don't forget, this is not a road locomotive, this is an agricultural locomotive conversion. The paintwork on the smokebox was a bit scabby too, so I repainted that using HMG Paint's satin black. Here the paint is wet, but when it dries you won't see the brush marks. This satin black paint is nearer matte than gloss. If you look at this clip, this is a motion bracket where it mounts to the boiler. There's already been some manual touching in of the paint around the mounting. Once again I'm using HMG satin black to paint the motion bracket. I'm also going to paint the nuts as well, just to stop them going rusty. Quite rare in traction engines of this size, it has a copper boiler, and as you can see, the studs that the nuts fit on are made from phosphor bronze. And now for something completely different. This is the clip that fits on the battery that sits in the box that is currently sat on the top of the canopy. I'm resoldering the wires to the battery clip. Using a small soldering iron, I've already cleaned off the remains of the wiring and the solder on the connectors. I've stripped back some of the insulation on the red and black wires, and here I'm tinning the wire. Once I've tinned the wires, I chop them to length. If you've never done any soldering with a soldering iron, this is the way to do it. Make sure that the tip of your soldering iron is clean, apply a small amount of solder to it first, then hold the soldering iron tip against the wire that you're soldering, then apply some electrical solder to the area where the soldering iron tip touches the wire, and you'll see the solder flows into the wire. And here's the finished job. The red wire and the black wire are now securely soldered to the tags. Now I'm going to make a new bolt, or something similar to a bolt. The distinctive twisted brass canopy supports, also known as olivers, are all bolted in place at various points on the engine. To connect the generator belt from the flywheel to the pulley on the generator requires one of these brass olivers to be removed. I don't mean removed completely, that's not necessary, it just needs taking off at one end so you can put the belt in behind it. And that's what the bolt was for that I've just shown. The problem is though, if you want to quickly attach and detach the belt, you need to find a spanner. Once again, that's why I would use a Barco spanner and always have one in my pocket. I'm currently making a fixing that will hold the oliver to the cylinder and can be removed without using a spanner. I'm making this part using a piece of leaded bronze. This is free cutting phosphor bronze. And I'm using the original bolt as a gauge to get the length right. I've omitted quite a lot of the machining process in this episode. Suffice to say, I'm turning down the centre part of this piece of leaded bronze to a diameter of 1/4 inch. Once this part is 1/4 inch in diameter, I'm going to use a 1/4 BSF die to cut a thread part of the way down it, which should match the original bolt exactly. I'm not going to thread it yet though. What I need to do first is knurl it. And for that I'm using a knurling tool. This persuades a pattern to appear on the surface of the metal. There are different types of knurling tools. This is one I've had for many years, and you have to put quite a lot of pressure, side pressure that is, against the work to make it cut. I prefer the type that clamp on top and bottom. I used to have one of the clamp type knurling tools, but I gave it to a friend who was starting out in the hobby. So here you see the principle. I'm applying side pressure against the work, I've engaged the auto traverse, and the knurling tool is moving along. And this leaves an embossed pattern in its wake. This is not quite deep enough, so I came back the other way. the tool engages with the existing pattern perfectly. And now I have a perfect knurl on the piece of phosphor bronze. The only problem is the edge of it is very sharp. And here is the finished knurl. You can see that it's much deeper now. The trouble is though, the edge of this knurl is really sharp, and as I don't want to cut my fingers every time I fit and remove the drive belt to the generator, I'm using a V-tool to remove the sharp edge. And while the V-tool was in the tool post, I made a mark further down where I'm going to part it off. In this clip I'm using a die holder to cut the thread on the shaft. And here is the finished thread. The final part of the job is to part this off, then refit it into the chuck the other way around to clean off the outer part, once again removing all sharp edges. Here you see the finished component in its application. And now I do not need a spanner to remove and refit the generator belt. And here's the generator belt fitted. A very simple job. Yesterday I had the pleasure of speaking to the previous owner of this engine on the phone. And one of the questions I asked him was about the generator, because even though it spins it doesn't light any of the lights. I'm waiting for the battery to arrive to fit onto the connector that I've newly soldered. Then I can start to look into the problem of why the lights are not lighting up. The previous owner mentioned that I needed to run the engine in reverse when using the generator, and that is obvious because running in reverse the top part of the belt flaps about less. That's it for this episode. Stay safe, stay well, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists, and by doing that you will find it very easy to find other videos that you may like to watch.